From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, and here's what's ahead. From the Livestock Marketing Information Center, Jim Robb will offer his insight on the cattle market trends. He'll share the LMIC's projections for cattle in feedlots this past month and the U.S. cattle inventory report, as those USDA reports on both are on hold because of the government shutdown. Also today, K-State's Robin Reid will talk about a newly updated spreadsheet from K-State that can help interested parties in formulating a beef cow herd lease. Later, Jeff Wickman has this week's 4-H segment. He'll talk with K-State's Deryl Waldren, talks about the opportunities to be a Kansas 4-H host family for international youth this summer. All that and more here on Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
You are listening to Agriculture Today from the campus of Kansas State University. Glad to have you along. For our cattle market segment this week, we check in once more with the Livestock Marketing Information Center based in Denver and an agricultural economist there, Jim Robb. Jim, this fed cattle market, well, it's prone to its occasional stumbles lately, but it's for the most part on pretty solid footing.
Fed market's on solid footing, I think, Eric. Seasonally, we tend to get some strength in the fed cattle market. We've added on to that we're very current in feed yards. And then we've had a bit of a weather market on top of that with the weather conditions adding to cattle prices. We have very muddy conditions, as you well know, across much of Nebraska and Kansas for quite an extended period of time. So all those factors that come together, we had trade through Friday morning last week at 125, rather light trade, but a market that's $3 a hundredweight above the prior week and nearly $4 above a year ago. So I'd say the wholesale beef market slipped for the week slightly, but on Thursday and Friday gained some ground. And so that choice beef cutout was holding together quite well on volume that we moved through the marketplace that was quite adequate. In other words, for 2 weeks in a row, we've moved most of the product that seemed to be available. So market seems to be pretty well underpinned here. Now, we hope some of the weather market disappears from a production standpoint, but I don't think it's a dramatic adjustment downward in the short term.
So as far as the negative performance consequences of the adverse weather, you're thinking this won't have an extended impact on the fed cattle trade?
No, but it's been pretty significant. We have a lot of muddy cattle where cattle feeders can only get bids on a dress basis, and so that's been a challenge. We've certainly have had probably more negative impact in the feeder cattle and calf market with these muddy feedlot conditions, and so that's dampened those calf prices. Last week, the 5 to 6 weight steer calves, most places, were down $1 to $6 a hundredweight compared to the prior week. So a little bit of softness in this calf and yearling market again. That's probably these muddy feedlots, especially in the central and northern plains and in Iowa, dampening interest in placing cattle.
And you do say, Jim, we need to keep in mind there's something of an informational void out there in as far as cattle market weights, which lends at least a bit of uncertainty to all this.
That's right, Eric. Unfortunately, with the USDA shutdown of much of this market information, we don't really know what these cattle weights are doing. We think the preliminary USDA numbers, though, are probably showing these cattle much heavier than they probably actually are. So beef production is probably a little bit lower than what USDA reported last week, which was down 1% year over year. It's probably down a little bit more than that. We don't think there's a counter-seasonally heavier cattle coming out of feed yards, and with the weather, they're probably lighter. So, the beef production seems to be in check, and some of that is the weights, and as you were mentioning, that's tied back to this animal performance in feed yards.
But it would seem, Jim, that the absence of this market information is becoming more than just an inconvenience for the trade.
Yeah, it's hard. USDA recalibrates these dressed weights based on the actual data that NASS puts together weekly, and we've not recalibrated the weights. And we have an upcoming cattle on feed report. We can talk about some of our ideas for that report, but we've essentially gotten to the point where the surveys have not gone out for the monthly cattle on feed report, so probably not going to have that data on the 25th. So this is now starting to have more and more reverberations in terms of the data available, so that we kind of have the markets operating efficiently and effectively on its normal flow of timely information.
Well, since you brought it up, let's speculate a bit about what that cattle on feed report might have said. And same thing with respect to the cattle inventory report due out next week. What are your thoughts?
Well, on the cattle on feed report, again, that may be a goner already, Eric. But as we look at the numbers, we would put placements slightly above a year ago. Now, the headwind to the placements, especially in Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa, have been the muddy feed yard conditions. But we think in the southern plains, and we've had bigger feeder cattle imports from Mexico, and we've had auction barn movement in most of the nation above a year ago. So we'd have placements slightly above a year ago, marketing slightly down from a year ago. Not enough that it really worries us in a marketing sense. Again, the weights seem to be well in check. And so that'll leave us an on-feed count of about 2% above a year ago, maybe a shade more. That's very much in line with the growth in the supplies of calves and yearlings and in the overall inventory numbers, and down from the large year-over-year increases that we had in much of 2018. So that on-feed inventory seems to be kind of coming back in line a little bit, Eric. Again, we probably won't get a report, and we looked further down the road. These pre-report estimates are based on prior data from USDA, and we think the pre-report estimates, or what people will see, will be a very wide range again this month. So I suspect that people have placements below a year ago that are heavily looking at Central and Northern Plains data, and above a year ago if they're looking at Texas data. So, not having the USDA data sets even more uncertainty for the next cattle on feed report, because they build on each other.
And then there's the question of whether cattle herd expansion has leveled off, which would be addressed in the cattle inventory report. The fate of those numbers in limbo as well.
Well, it is. That comes out later in the month, and some of that cattle inventory report groundwork would have been done by USDA prior to the shutdown. Maybe not the actual survey, but the groundwork would be more done. Now, it's a bigger report. USDA may have some options to delay that report if the shutdown persists very much longer, but it certainly is a risk. Our assessment of the cattle inventory on January 1 would be a beef cow herd that's up 0.2 to 0.3% year over year, and probably a total inventory that's up on the order of 0.3 to 0.5% year over year. So the rate of growth in the overall cattle inventory is moderating significantly compared to the last few years, and that's our sense without a report, kind of looking at the data that's available so far. But that's a little bit tricky as we've now gone through nearly 6 weeks of a government shutdown, so by the time we get to that point. So that's a very important report. It gives us a real gauge of how the overall herd is, and it gives us our best estimate of the size of the 2018 calf crop. And that's a number that gets very important here as we look ahead to placements and how the cattle market will develop in 2019.
Just to follow up then, is there any chance, Jim, of herd contraction to any degree in 2019?
I think as we move through 2019, Mother Nature, as you know, Eric, always has a potentially big impact in terms of forage resources, et cetera, in the industry. But we think we stay on this general trend of, the rate of growth moderating even more. And our initial assessment would be not a herd reduction in 2019, but no year-over-year growth. And so from a meat supply standpoint, we have growing population and maybe some growing exports. So that would tighten domestic supplies a little bit. But again, Mother Nature can have a big impact with a short corn crop. We have many factors that could set up where producers do a little bit more aggressive culling, especially of their beef cow herds. And we know the dairy cow herd is under pretty aggressive culling. And so there is a possibility that the overall cow herd could be down in 2019. We're getting very close to no change in the inventory as of January 1, 2019.
Well, something that you say has your full attention, Jim, is the state of the macroeconomy, which will, of course, cascade down, if you will, and influence the cattle market. There have been some ripples there, to put it that way, that have raised concerns.
We've had a real mixed bags of reports in the last week or 10 days, Eric. We had an unemployment report in terms of people filing for unemployment insurance that was a very positive, given the government shutdown, et cetera. In terms of the unemployment claims, that was much less than anticipated. And we've had a mixed bag in terms of the manufacturing sector in the U.S. Some reports look like a little bit of a bounce back, and some reports look like a continued slowdown that started in late 2018. Then the third report that came out on Friday morning was the monthly preliminary survey from the University of Michigan on consumer sentiment, which is the national baseline number. Now, this is the preliminary number, and it came out, and it's probably reflecting some of the discouragement that happened in the stock market in late 2018 and the government shutdown. But the preliminary assessment for January was the lowest consumer confidence index number since October 2016. And, it reflects a lot of uncertainty in this major consumer survey, including the government shutdown, the impact of tariffs, instability in financial markets, increasing interest rates, and a global economic slowdown. Now, as you stand back and look at this report, and the assessment of this report is that this does not necessarily bode for a recession imminently, but it's rather consistent with a clear slowdown in the pace of economic growth in the U.S. And kind of as the consumer goes, as 70% of the U.S. economy, that's a real driver in terms of their potential demand for beef and other animal-based protein. So we need to watch the economy and the consumer confidence aspects here because as 2019 unfolds here, we've had some mixed signals, and certainly on the consumer side, we've had some real softening.
All right. Jim, as always, many thanks.
Been my pleasure, Eric.
Visit there with agricultural economist Jim Robb of the Livestock Marketing Information Center on what's going on in the cattle markets here on Agriculture Today.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
We're back now on this Agriculture Today, and for you now, information on a new tool that's available to you cattle producers interested in livestock leasing arrangements. It's on the agmanager.info website out of K-State Agricultural Economics. And one of the co-authors of this is with us now, agricultural economist Robin Reid of K-State Research and Extension. Now, you and one of your associates, Robin, were invited to put this together, an updated version, because there's increasing interest, you say, in these types of cow herd leases.
Well, a cow herd lease can be advantageous to both parties for a number of reasons. Everybody knows we have an older generation of farmers out there that are maybe getting ready to retire or want to just not do the day-to-day work of the cow herd anymore. So by still owning the cow herd but leasing it out might be advantageous for tax reasons or other financial reasons as well. But just having a part in that business still. Really, for the younger generation, this provides an opportunity, though, that they can get into the business without actually having to have the capital to purchase that cow herd. So there's been a lot of interest here in the last few years on doing these types of arrangements.
And these could potentially evolve into a lease to own or various manifestations of a leasing arrangement,
yes,
don't they?
Yes, and we have used this tool to do some of those types of arrangements where it's each year the livestock operator gets a certain number of cows along with the lease and slowly transitions that herd to their ownership. So that is definitely something you can explore as well.
What's important here, and this is what you've strived for as you and colleague Glenn Tonzer have put this together, is how to arrive at an equitable leasing agreement. What needs to go into that to assure that happens?
The difficulty in this as in all of agriculture, there is a lot of risk going into production and price with running a cow herd. And so obviously some marketing risk that prices can change when you negotiate this lease to when you actually are selling those calves in the fall or after some backgrounding. Production risk, obviously the calving rates that these cows are going to have, the herd health, the feed prices. We've talked before, that's the biggest cost of running a cow year-round is feeding that cow. So some uncertainty in those prices as well going into the lease. All of these things contribute to just uncertain production and price until the sale of those animals. So a lot of producers and owners have gotten around this or helped spread this risk out by sharing a percentage of that calf crop at sales instead of doing strictly cash on running those cows. And I think that's a really good way to set that arrangement up so that that production and that price risk is split between both parties.
Arriving to a proper share, though, well, that's where this spreadsheet that you've put together comes in?
Exactly. So that's the big question. What percent of calves should go to the owner and what percent should go to the livestock operator? So we did some basic assumption and put together this tool that hopefully can be catered to any situation that a cow lease might encounter. So basically, we took the yearly budget for running a cow, capturing all of the costs that go into that cow year-round, and then assign each of those costs to the cattle owner or the livestock operator. And that doesn't need to be 100% one way or another. It could be split. So just for some examples, maybe the operator will contribute the pasture. So it'll be their land or their leased land that these cows are going to be running on during the summer. The bulls or the AI might be provided by the owner as part of the cow herd lease. Vet medicine or drugs might be split 50-50 between the two parties. So each of the costs that go into running that cow herd, you assign what percent each party is paying for. So then the basic principle is you add all of these expenses up that are contributed to this cow herd arrangement, and the ratio of calves to split is equal to the percent of the expenses that each party is contributing.
And really, it's a matter of individuals then plugging in their representative numbers for all of those components and arriving at that potentially equitable split.
Exactly. So when you open the spreadsheet, you'll see there's some numbers populated in there already. And what these are is we took our livestock budgeting guide for the cow-calf herd and then ran it into this tool and just put a default split in there. So, for example, we have the livestock operator providing the pasture and all the feed right now. Most of the labor, 95% of the labor we have as a default. Obviously, these are things you need to change for your situation. Vet med and drugs are split 50-50. We have the cattle owner providing the replacement females, the bull or AI charge, and then any utilities, machinery, depreciation, anything like that is the operator's expense. The cattle owner does get ownership interest for owning those cows, and it's basically a return on his investment in the capital of those animals, and then any death loss that might occur on them are expenses that he's contributing. So when we add all these up, we're taking the total cost, and then, like I said before, we're allocating the percent of calves to split based on the total cost that each party is contributing.
And then what is that split when you get to the bottom line?
So for our raised replacement heifer spreadsheet, and I'll talk the difference between raised and purchased in a minute, but we as a default came up with pretty much a 80-20 arrangement where, again, the operator who's doing most all of the expenses, in particular feed and pasture, they'll be getting 80% of the calves and the owner will be getting 20%. Now, this doesn't mean that this applies to every arrangement that has raised replacement heifers. For a producer with these costs shared in this way, an 80-20 may be an equitable arrangement. Now, I'm going to stress we're using state numbers for this, and eastern Kansas and western Kansas are very different. Right. So everybody needs to go in here, put in their own costs, and split the expenses based on the arrangement that they're going to have.
You mentioned, though, the variable raised replacements as opposed to purchased replacements, so that might bear some definition here, Robin.
So when you go into the tool, there's actually two tabs, one for raised and one for purchased, just because there's such a big distinction between the two arrangements. So in the raised replacement tab, you're going by the principle that you're selling all the calves, But in expenses, you are buying back that heifer calf that will be retained as part of the herd. Now, the price in developing the heifer expenses needs to be included. For a good example of this, if you're talking about pasture and maybe you're running a cow-calf on, let's say, 6 acres of pasture for 6 months, you also need to factor in the percentage of the heifer that's being developed to replace that cow. Say we have a 16% heifer cow replacement. So in the cow budget, her contribution would be 16% of the expenses to raise that replacement heifer. So in that pasture of 6 acres, we might actually bring that up to 16% of whatever it's taking to run that heifer as well.
So that calculation could become rather involved.
Yes.
Hence the value of this spreadsheet.
Yes. The bottom line is if we're developing heifers within the arrangement, we need to capture those costs at the heifer replacement rate within our budget. Now, if we look at purchased animals, here we're selling all the calves, and in the expenses, we are buying a bred heifer that is ready to go. In that arrangement, obviously, you don't have the expenses of developing the heifer, so the defaults you'll see are definitely lower. And again, we're bringing in a developed heifer instead of the purchased heifer calf.
You say, as you are encouraging folks to take a look at this, that there are some cautions to be observed as they employ this tool.
As we made this tool, obviously we're making it so you can adjust it to your individual situation, because no two situations, even the same region of Kansas, would be the same. It's meant for you to change the numbers. They're good defaults, but it's meant for you to look at and put your own numbers in there. The cautions that I would say are herd size plays a big part in these cow lease arrangements, and a lot of that comes in labor. Obviously, if we have a small cow herd, the labor requirements are going to be quite a bit bigger. And so you'll see in there as a default, we're assuming about 8 hours per cow per year. And we just put in $25 an hour. That's probably kind of high as you're looking at an hourly rate to go check cattle kind of thing. But you got to think of all the costs, the time and the management, the financial side of running that cow herd. So really take a look at those labor costs in relation to the size of herd you're working with. Along with that herd size, replacement rate, and culling percentages, I mentioned we use 16% as a default. If you think of a cow herd of 100 cows, are you really pulling out 16 cull cows and putting in 16 new heifers a year? Think of that in terms of how many cows are you actually running and how many of them are you really replacing and retaining every year. And that retaining number might likely be higher than your cull cow number. So really taking a look at that, because it does have a large effect on the bottom line, how many calves should go to the operator and how many calves should go to the owner.
The tool is out there and ready for producers or those who want to operate as the, quote, tenant to use at agmanager.info, and it really is a fairly simple spreadsheet to utilize, right?
Yes, we think so. But if you have questions, don't be afraid to get a hold of myself or Glenn Tonser or even your local extension agent.
Go once again to agmanager.info, and you're looking for KSU Beef Cow Lease, the Excel spreadsheet tool that they put together. Robin, thank you for coming over.
Thank you, Eric.
Robin Reid with us from the Department of Agricultural Economics here at K-State. Again, this spreadsheet available for your use, producers, at agmanager.info if you are interested in putting together a beef cow lease. You're listening to Agriculture Today. We'll be back with more after these moments away on the K-State Radio Network.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
Agriculture Today returns now here on the K-State Radio Network. Eric Atkinson with you. And for you here, a quick rundown of the K-State Research and Extension agricultural calendar directly ahead. Informational meetings aplenty for you producers coming up. The most immediate of which, the K-State soybean production schools we've been telling you about. Registration for the last 5 of those schools is still open, and 4 of those are set for this week. More directly, coming up on Thursday the 24th in Hugoton. That starts at 8:30 in the morning. Then the afternoon of the 24th in Scott City, that at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And on Friday the 25th, there will be a soybean production school in Hoxie. That's an 8:30 start. And then later that day at 3 o'clock, a school in Great Bend. And the last one is a week from today, January the 28th, in Beloit. That's a 9 o'clock program. You can find out more about these by going to agronomy.ksu.edu. Lunch is provided at each by the Kansas Soybean Commission. Or if you simply search for K-State Soybean Schools, that'll take you to the information on pre-registering for those. Now, for you hog producers, we're not too far away from the 2019 Swine Profitability Conference. It is set for Tuesday, February the 5th at the Stanley Stout Center here on the K-State campus. They're asking you to pre-register by this Saturday the 26th. The pre-registration fee is $25 per participant. Registration at the door will be $50 per. And this is the program for the 19 Swine Profitability Conference. After the welcome at 9:30, a look at the international trade and market outlook for hogs. From Iowa State University, Lee Schultz, agricultural economist, will join us. Lee, you hear frequently on our broadcast. Then the growth of the Carthage system in Kansas. Dr. Clayton Johnson of Carthage Veterinary Services with that presentation. And from Pokey Feeders here in Kansas, Grant Morgan will talk about raising pigs and cattle on the high plains. There will be the lunch at noon. And then shortly afterward, achieving high production in swine-dense areas, Dr. Noel Williams from Iowa Select Farms with that presentation. And the program is rounded out with a look at the bright future of the U.S. swine industry, as told by Bill Evan, the CEO of the National Pork Board. For more information, you can contact Lois here at K-State, 785-532-1267. That's 532-1267. Or you can find out more information by going to ksuswine.org. But again, the 2019 Swine Profitability Conference here at K-State. The date, Tuesday, February the 5th. The location, the Stanley Stout Center here on the K-State campus. And several prescribed burning workshops have been scheduled for the months of February and into March, more in the planning stages, hosted by K-State Research and Extension, among several other agencies. Each of these is set to last about 4 to 5 hours, and they'll include topics on reasons for burning, regulations, weather considerations, liability, burn contractors, equipment and crew, hazards, fuels, fire breaks, fire types and behavior, ignition techniques, and burn plans. You can contact Walt Fick here at K-State for more information or your local extension office, and be sure to contact that host extension agent to register for one of these workshops. They'll take place in the earlier part of February in Olathe, February the 2nd, the 14th of February, right here in Manhattan. Later on in the month, February 20th in Russell, the 21st in Fredonia, and the 25th in Barnes. There'll be one of these workshops the 27th of February in Winfield and the 28th at Sylvan Grove, March the 1st Effingham, March the 6th at Ottawa, and March the 8th at Logan. You can, again, touch base with your local extension office to find out more about these prescribed burning workshops, or contact K-State's Walt Fick. Walt's number is 785-532-7223, 785-532-7223. And there are 3 of those corn pre-plant schools here in 2019 to provide in-depth training for you corn producers with targeted information at each location. These are set for the month of February, the 11th in Parsons, 13th in Heston, February 15th in Garden City. You can go online to kscorn.com to find out more about those, as these are co-sponsored by Kansas Corn. Those are the pre-plant corn schools coming up in February. Now we go to this week's edition of Tree Tales with K-State Forester, Bob Atchison. Bob?
Each year, the USDA Forest Service inventories a percentage of the forest land of the United States. At the end of their 5-year inventory cycle, a report is published summarizing trends and conditions. Such a report has just been published, recording changes between 2011 and 2015 for the Northern Great Plains, which includes Kansas, Nebraska, and the Dakotas. There are 6.8 million acres of forest land in the Northern Great Plains, with Kansas leading all the other states with 2.5 million acres. There is an additional 5.1 million acres and 458 million trees that don't qualify as forest land in the region, but are still critical components of windbreaks and riparian woodlands. Forest land cover is defined as being at least an acre in size, 120 feet wide, 10% stocked with canopy cover. Forest land has increased in area by 3% or 200,000 acres since 2010, but unfortunately most of this increase has likely been caused by the expansion of eastern red cedar into grasslands and not trees adjacent to our streams and rivers, where most of our forest land is needed in the Great Plains. Other areas of concern include the expansion of invasive species like Asian bush honeysuckle, which decreases biodiversity in the natural regeneration of oaks, walnut, sycamore, and many other native trees that make up Kansas woodlands. The two most common forest types include the sugarberry, hackberry, elm, green ash complex and the elm ash black locust complex, comprising 61 and 66% respectively. The area of eastern red cedar has also nearly doubled during this time period. The most common species include hackberry at 19%, American elm at 18%, Osage orange at 15%, and eastern red cedar at 15% in Kansas. Another concern is that 71% of cottonwoods are mature or overmature and are not regenerating. This is due to the loss of floodplains and natural flooding disturbances that provided the needed seed beds for regeneration. The Kansas Forest Service has the tools to address these problems and improve the quality of our farmers' and ranchers' woodlands. Why not give us a call at 785-532-3310 or check us out on the web at www.kansasforest.org. This is Bob Atchison. You've been listening to another Tree Tale.
Thanks, Bob. And you're listening to Agriculture Today. Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today 800-321-3276 or visit us online, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions.
This is Agriculture Today. I'm Jeff Wickman. Kansas 4-H has a long-running partnership with several countries that provides 4-H members and families an opportunity to be involved in international youth exchange programs. Northwest Area 4-H Specialist Deryl Waldren says the application forms for those wishing to serve as a host family this summer are now available on the Kansas 4-H website. Deryl, in terms of the international programs, there are a lot of opportunities for folks in Kansas to be host families.
There are. Kansas is one of the states that bought early into this after exchanges through 4-H became popular after World War II, and Kansas began in 1948 with sending an FE to Sweden. And since then, Kansas has been involved for 71 years now with international exchange programs, both sending delegates as well as hosting. And so today's program, I'm really going to focus on some of the hosting opportunities that Kansas 4-H families would have as an opportunity for summer of 2019, because I know that many families begin to think about in February and March what it is that they want to participate as a family in for summer. So we want to be able to put out there what are some of the opportunities.
At this point, there are 3 opportunities?
Yes. One of the main programs that we have this summer will be the Kansas 4-H Japanese Exchange. And Kansas started hosting in 1977, and we've hosted since. And we'll be hosting about 30 exchangees and their chaperones this summer, and they will range in age from 12, 13, 14, 15, and maybe a few 16-year-olds, but the bulk of them are 12, 13, 14. So we're going to need families that have the same gender, meaning a host brother or host sister, depending on the exchange delegate, as well as within plus or minus 2 years. And so we'll need around 30 host families for those this summer, and that application, you can actually go online now and begin to fill it out, and the matchups will be happening in February. We get notice of who will be hosting in Kansas, and then we can begin to match them up with individual family likes and preferences with what the exchange delegate says on their biography sheet. So we try to match up what the interests of the Japanese exchangee are with some of the interests of the host family.
You are also looking for families from Norway and Costa Rica.
Correct, and this would be one of the other programs that we offer through States 4-H International Exchange Programs. We collaborate with them. And so this summer we'll have the opportunity, families will, to host a Norwegian 4-H member or a Costa Rican 4-H member for about 4 weeks in their home. And so those applications will be due by, I believe, March 1. And again, that application process is on the web where they can begin to fill that out and get that information in and submitted. And it is an online form, so it's real easy to submit.
What are some of the key characteristics that you look for in a host family?
Well, we need a family that's willing to maybe stretch themselves, perhaps a family that wants to look for a way to expose children and family members to a different culture. But mostly it's about being willing to be open and to experience new things back and forth, because there will be generally some language issues, especially with the Japanese. When they arrive, their English is not real good, but it does pick up in that 4 weeks that they're here. So being open, wanting to learn new things, willing to share about our families here in Kansas with that exchange member, just being ready to see and experience new things.
And this is not something where you change your lifestyle. It's really just letting them observe and participate in your life?
That is correct. It's more of having an exchange delegate that lives and experiences life through the eyes of that family. And that's a good thing, because we don't expect families to take their exchange delegate on a vacation. Though if the family's going on one, it's certainly okay for the exchange person to go on it and experience that. But you don't have to do special things. It's just they're here to learn about life in Kansas and families in Kansas. And the best learning occurs in just everyday life, what a normal family does, whatever normal is.
You have been involved with this program for a number of years. What are some of the stories you hear from participants and host families as to the overall experience?
The overall experience is very positive, and I guess some of the testimonials will be that, you've got family members that maybe changed their life forever. I mean, the families are linked for decades. Like, for example, I went to Poland in 1977, and I still have contact, and in fact, my favorite family is now naturalized U.S. citizens, and so we've been linked for 42 years now, and, they're like a second family. We view each other as family, and I try to visit them once a year. So we often see those experiences go on for decades. Even after the host parents pass away, you've got those siblings still staying in contact with their exchange person.
This is something that involves the entire family, so an opportunity for everyone to participate in this adventure, really.
Yes, it is, and we would hope that the whole family is engaged, because sometimes it's the parents that want to host an exchange person for cross-cultural experiences for their children, but the children really need to be on board too and want to host, because it doesn't work when just the parents want to host. And the last opportunity experience would be the IFE program, International 4-H Youth Exchange. We'll be hosting several young adults. They're usually late teens, early 20s in Kansas this summer. I don't know the exact countries yet, but we'll be needing probably 18 to 20 host families that will host someone from around the world. They usually host 2 to 3 weeks each, generally 3 weeks if we can, and so we'll need 18, 20 families for that. And like last year, we hosted exchangees from Greece, Estonia, Thailand, Switzerland, and Germany. The countries change from year to year, but we try to have a variety of countries so that people can get the exchange from a particular country that they may have an interest in.
Deryl, I know you have some assistance with this program. Who are some of the other people that they could contact?
And the website will outline the different coordinators that we have for the different programs, and I will mention those. Rose Scott is the coordinator for the Kansas 4-H Japanese Exchange, and she's been doing it a number of years. For the IFEs coming to Kansas, we have Chelsea Champlin, who's our Kansas IFE inbound coordinator. And then Mary Kay Munson is our State's 4-H Academic Program Coordinator. And one of the programs that I didn't mention was that we have the year-long academic program, which is the high school exchange that will start again in August and run through June of 20. And we're looking for a couple of families that would be willing to host a delegate in their home for that following year. And so Mary Kay Munson does the academic year program as well as the program with Norway and Costa Rica this summer.
And all of this information can be found online at kansas4h.org?
Yes, and if you look under what's hot, you can hit the links for hosting this summer, and that'll take you to that specific page, and it will list whether you're hosting through States 4-H or you're hosting an IFE. And there's two different sections there, so please fill out the appropriate application for the program that you're applying for.
And make sure you check the dates so that you get that application submitted on time.
Yes, and for IFEs, we hope to have those all found and lined up by about May 1 to June 1, and that's for the Japanese exchange. We would love to have them all placed by May 1, but it's critical to have everybody placed by June 1.
That's Northwest Area 4-H Specialist Deryl Waldren. Again, information about being a Kansas 4-H Youth Exchange host family is available at kansas4h.org. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. Along with Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.